Okay, this video is going to introduce classes, which is something that's really important to tackle in terms of really taking this on, because this sort of levels you up to the next level of complexity for building out a complex sketch, which allows multiple interactions. It all runs much quicker. You can have a lot of nuance and finesse. You can have big changes. You can add big changes very quickly to it. And so let's kind of walk through what this is. First, maybe we'll just go down and we'll look at the class and the different pieces and parts. So here you see we have something called class, and that's how you declare that you're creating a class. You give it a name, so you decide what the unique name is. And as I've mentioned before, give it a capital O as compared to the functions. When we were talking about those were all lowercase. You begin with a lowercase letter. For classes, you begin with an uppercase letter. Now we're declaring variables. These are the variables that will be associated with the class. And so we've got a color C, a float x position, a float y position, a float x speed, a float y speed, and a float diameter. Okay. And so we declare the variables. And then in the constructor, we load the variables. So you can see we've got an open curly brace here. We go down through the list, and then we go to the name of the class, the parentheses, another curly brace. So this is embedded within this. This didn't close. This is still open. And so now we're assigning values. So we're passing values of this into this class. So C is equal to a color which is 255, which is white, x position is 10, y position is 10, x speed 1, y speed 1.3, diameter is 20. Then so then that closes, right? So that's a chunk, the constructor, and that builds the instance of the class. Then we go to display, and this is a method of the class or a function of the class, and this is basically drawing the object. So it's setting the stroke, setting the fill, setting the x position, y position, diameter. And then we have a second method or function which is called move, and we've basically embedded the two previous functions that we were describing in the previous video into one, which is just called move, which is basically we're iterating the values up. We're actually doing it twice, which is unnecessary. And we're also checking to see if the x position or y position is hitting the edges. And then we exit the class. So you can see there's a curly brace here, and then this curly brace actually pairs with that curly brace up there. So this is all self-contained, and this sits down at the very bottom of the code. So here, if we go up to the top, we're declaring the class. So orb is declaring the class. So it's a type of orb. And then it's my orb. So this is just naming the instance of the class, right? And so here in the draw loop, in the setup, we load the instance of the class. So my orb, again, the variable name that you selected, is equal to new orb, which is a new instance of the class orb. And then it's got empty parameters. And that's because the parameters are hard-coded into the way the class was constructed. And then down in the draw loop, we've just got two lines of code. It's myOrb.move and myOrb.display. Okay, so if we run this, we're getting the exact same expected behavior. There's nothing particularly surprising here. We've just added a bunch of lines of code that, we could have written this much more simply without all this extra sort of twisting and bending to create a class. But in in the next video, you'll see now that you've separated out all of the different components of this bouncing ball into a class, we'll have the ability to have multiples of an instance of a class. You know, we can have orb my orb 2, and so on and so forth, and we can build out a long list. Whoops. Of these, which would also be very inefficient, but it's illustrative of this is how you build out instances of a class. So this gives you the basic construct. You're basically just going to follow this organization, and when we move into the next couple tutorials, you'll get to see how powerful this is in terms of managing multiples of things and actually being able to see them and move them and manipulate them based on individual parameters that you pass into them. So let's stop this and we'll move on to the next. Okay.